In the studio with me, two men in the middle of this, both, I believe, have been dealing with the Anti-Corruption Commission in the last 24 hours. Former Detective Ron Iddles and Charlie Bezzina. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning, Neil.
Ron Iddles, what are the implications of this? In very simple terms, what are the implications?
The implications are that this puts in doubt comments that were made by Rod Miller on the night as a dying declaration. This police officer was approached and asked to insert something in his statement which he said, I never heard. He confirmed that with me in 2015, and he said he went to the Supreme Court knowing that he was perjuring himself. He was called to a hearing where he said, yes, I told Ron that, but I made it up. The production now of this first statement shows that what he told me was true. The implications are quite clearly there needs to be an inquiry. Both statements are dated at 4:25am on the morning in August. One doesn't have conversation, one does. There are two other police officers who make additional statements after the arrest of Roberts, which again indicate there's more than one offender. This is a manipulation of the facts to fit a theory that the detectives had. Sadly, what this means is there's only one or two that know about the existence of this statement. There are many detectives who work on the Lorimer Task Force who did a wonderful job, and sadly that good work that they did is now being brought undone.
Does this, well, there are two aspects. Does it undermine the conviction of Roberts?
Yes, it does.
Does it potentially implicate police in corruption?
Definitely.
At what level? Are they still in the job?
Well, that's for an inquiry to be determined and find out, but I understand one of them is not in the job, who was the one that approached Pullen.
Okay. Now, Charlie Bezzina, your signature appears on both these documents as at 4:25am Sunday the 16th of August 1998. Can't both be right.
No, that's true. When I learned of these two statements 2 weeks ago, I was floored, basically, and clearly they're my two signatures. Now, I'm trying to think as to how that came to be, and I've not seen the ink copy because I've only seen photostated copies. And then it's up now to IBAC to then try and source the inked copy.
Well, had you ever seen the statement that was presented to the court that in fact has those additional words about Rod Miller talking about two shooters, or about two shooters?
The first time I saw that statement was 2 weeks ago when Anthony Dowsley showed me. He rang me up and said, I've got something interesting to show you, and Ron Iddles will be there. So I went there and he produced that, and I said, well, that one is the statement that I took without the conversation, and this second one, dated the same time and date with my signature, I've never seen it before.
You're quite sure of that? Because it's a long time ago.
Well, I'm sure to the degree because the conversation is so significant. I've taken that statement hours after the murders. Had that been said to me at the first instance by Pullen, that would have been immediately sent back to the command post where the scene was to say, guys, we now been confirmed we're looking for two people. That's not the case at all. So it was a non-plus. Now, let's say, for example, I took that first statement of Pullen without the conversation, and at the end of it I've signed it off time and date, as I have, and then he said, oh, geez, Charlie, look, I've just remembered I did have a conversation with Miller. Miller told me certain things. That first statement would have still existed. I would have then said, I've previously made a statement, and the times would have been different.
So there would have been a supplementary statement?
Absolutely, because I don't get rid of the first one, you produce then the two statements. So then how that's come about, now whether, and the only person who can answer that as to how my signature got on that statement is either, and it happens from time to time, look, we've had to reformat the statement given over the period of years. Clearly, I would have seen Pullen's signature and that time and date, and I've just re-signed it.
So it's possible you re-signed it without reading it?
Well, I didn't read it. Had I read it...
Well, do you know that you don't know that you re-signed it?
Well, I know I re-signed it because that's definitely my signature.
Okay, but you don't think it's been forged somehow?
No, it hasn't been forged, but I haven't seen the ink copy. Have whoever's behind this, have they submitted a signed ink copy to the hand-up brief to the Supreme Court?
Well, if there's a signed ink copy, then forensic experts could work out whether it was signed by you or not.
Yeah, well, or
whether it was somehow photoshopped. Well, I don't know if that's possible.
Yeah, but I'm not shying away from it. I said to the investigators yesterday, I said, look, I'm more than convinced, looking at those two signatures and the block letters underneath it, that's definitely my signatures. And it's now me trying to work out, well, what was said to me to get me to sign that second statement without reading it. And I'll put trust in the detectives, as you do, the people that work for you, and say, okay, I'm not reading this witness statement. I'm just virtually reasserting what I did.
Okay, so you would possibly sign it without reading it?
Absolutely.
And that's common?
Yeah, it's common. Because with the amount of statements that we take as investigators, and especially a witness statement, and I knew I took that witness statement sometime previous, so I had no reason to go through it with a fine-tooth comb or question the detective who would approach me, whoever that was.
Well, if that's true, you've been conned.
Absolutely. And that's why, once I learnt that, my first reaction was, I've been embroiled in this now, and it looks like on face value that I'm part and parcel of this conspiracy. Well, I'm not. And that's why our first instinct was, this has got to be going higher, not just at our level, it's got to be given to some authority.
Conspiracy, Ron Iddles, is that too strong a word?
No, it's not, because there's more than one person involved in this. There has to be. This is not a Lone Ranger police officer going to another police officer and saying, listen, by the way, I want you to add some conversation in here. I want you to come to the Supreme Court and I want you to perjure yourself. There has to be more than one person who knows about this. If you have more than one person, you have a conspiracy.
Why would somebody go to the trouble of setting this up? Because there was other evidence to suggest Debs wasn't acting alone, even though it didn't say Roberts was there. There was evidence to suggest both in the listening devices and also police statements.
What I know is that there is one statement which indicates there may be two offenders on the night. It wasn't for some 18 months within that task force that they knew that definitely there was two offenders. There are police officers who make additional statements after the arrest of Debs and Roberts.
What, years later? Well, how much later?
3 years later, who say, I've previously made a statement. On reflection now, I remember I heard Rod Miller say this. One goes to the extent of giving a description. Without Glenn Pullen saying, I heard a conversation, it all falls over. He's the person who is comforting him at the time.
Is that unusual for 3 years later somebody to change or to add to what they're saying?
What I say, Neil, is beware of the witness whose memory improves with the passage of time. This was significant. On the night, if those police officers heard the description, it would have been reported. 3 years later, that one of them says, oh, I heard him say a description. Well, that would have been significant on the night. Here is a police officer who's sadly dying and passing away. You're going to hang on every word he says. You're going to remember it 3 years later? I don't think so.
Charlie Bezzina, have you got any idea when you signed this document with the additional words in it?
No idea whatsoever.
So it could have been 3 years later.
Absolutely. And the only one who can answer that is certainly a detective, whoever that is, has approached me. I say and confirm that is definitely my signature on that second statement with that conversation. So whatever excuse was given to me, I've accepted on face value the word of this detective and said, okay, and signed it, and away he's gone.
Do you know who that detective was? Do you remember?
No, not at all. Only from what Ron's uncovered, and it's a person who has been spoken to.
Have you spoken to IBAC about it?
Yeah, I spoke to them yesterday. I was with them for a couple of hours.
And Ron Iddles, you've certainly been to IBAC.
Yes, I have. I've been there twice.
The Anti-Corruption Commission. What happens now then?
Well, obviously they'll conduct an investigation. There has to be an investigation as to how this happened, why it happened, who knew about it. That first statement is material which was never ever provided to the defence. That's where I think there's going to be an issue in relation to the Court of Appeal, because that's material that, had it have been provided, they would have cross-examined witnesses in relation to what was in the statement.
The man whose statement it was that Charlie Bezzina took, Glenn Pullen, has changed his story, as you've already said a couple of times. Do we know where he stands now? Does he say he heard Rod Miller say something or not?
My last conversation with him was, I didn't hear him say anything, right? Then he admits that and says, yes, everything that I said to Ron, it's true, but I made it up for the reason I wanted workers' compensation. The production of this first statement now validates what he told me, and it can only be the truth.
Unequivocally, we've got two documents here that clash. There can't be an error there, because they're both signed at the same time by Charlie Bezzina, 4:25 a.m. Sunday the 16th of August, and one says things the other one doesn't. And that one that goes to court has words added which go to aid the conviction of Jason Roberts. Correct? So we have, apart from all the confusion and subtleties around it, we've got these two documents that clash. Something has gone wrong somewhere.
Correct.
And Charlie Bezzina has inadvertently signed a second document that has been tampered with.
Absolutely. And I still maintain that first statement, without the conversation, is the accurate one. Because I took it on the same date, hours after the murder, without the conversation, and then that's been buried somewhere along the line until it's now surfaced.
Well, Ron Iddles, how crucial do you believe this altered document was, potentially falsified document? How crucial was that in the conviction of Jason Roberts?
I think it's very crucial because it holds everything else together. It holds the fact that two police officers make statements after the arrest of Debs and Roberts saying, on reflection, I now remember this. Without Glenn Pullen saying, I heard a conversation, the other bits fall over.
But you are of the opinion Jason Roberts is innocent.
On the balance of probabilities, from my review, Neil, I didn't ask to do this. I put my head in the chopping block by being honest, having integrity, doing it without fear or favour. Even though this has come out now, the guillotine will still come down and I'll be blamed for this.
By whom? By the police force? By your colleagues?
There'll be people who will say, they already are, Ron's a rogue, Ron's gone off the rails. I didn't make that statement. I didn't go to a police officer and say, I want you to perjure yourself in the Supreme Court. I'm not driving this. I'm not the police officer who took it to the Herald Sun, who's obviously aggrieved by the fact that there's been some comments made recently.
Charlie Bezzina, do you believe, or do you have an opinion on whether Jason Roberts is guilty or innocent?
No, I don't, because I don't know the intricacies of the case. Once I finished on those days into that first investigation, I had no further part in it. So all I know is what the man in the street knows, what I've read about it. I was never called to the trial, and I was never questioned about it at all.
So you didn't give evidence, only your statement,
that's
this
right,
altered statement, went in as evidence.
and accepted. There was certainly some cross-examination by defence in relation to it, and Pullen obviously gave evidence, but that's the extent of my knowledge. So I'm not going into innocence or guilt of Roberts because I just don't know.
Okay, we have an IBAC inquiry, the Independent Broad-Based Anti-Corruption Commission. Where else should it go? Does this need a further inquiry, or does it rest with IBAC, Ron Iddles?
I think it needs a judicial inquiry. This is at the heart of justice, right? This is a police officer who told me that he perjured himself in the Supreme Court. So I think it needs more than an IBAC inquiry, but that's a matter for the government. And then it's a matter for Roberts' defence team as to what they do with this new information.
But the Attorney-General has already ruled out, on the basis of your report, a further inquiry.
Yes, but this is material which he didn't have. This is new material which was buried, no one knew about. He may now have to reassess his position.
Okay, the Attorney-General, we believe, had already agreed to an inquiry and then backed away from it. Is that correct? Originally, when you put your original statement in, it was reported that he had wanted an inquiry but then changed his mind.
No, I'm not aware of that.
Okay, well, we'll talk to the Attorney-General later. Final point. Let's get this clear. There are two statements, one of which has been altered. The altered one goes to the court, and that altered one implicates Roberts, or indicates another person more than the original statement, which you believe was accurate.
Correct.
Both signed purporting to be done the same statement, and they've been changed.
Correct.
What do you want, Charlie Bezzina?
Well, I want to be vilified in the fact and shown that I had no part whatsoever in that second statement apart from, okay, I've signed it and I accept that. Again, I'd be criticised and saying, oh, well, you should have read it, you should have done this, you should have done that.
So you want to be vindicated, not vilified. Vindicated, yeah.
Absolutely. So ultimately, I've been embroiled in this because now that the two statements have emerged, and it's now in the hands of the authorities of IBAC at this stage, and then ultimately I'm there to assist them. I need to go back again, and they'll be speaking to me further. So ultimately, what Ron's been told, and the person who holds the key is certainly Pullen, is going to start it, and then we'll see then who else is involved in the whole situation. So ultimately, it needs to be aired, it needs to be cleared, and I need to be shown that I've certainly had no part whatsoever in this, because I just do not, I don't get involved in any of that.
Ron Iddles, as we broke the news on this program that you were in fact being investigated after a complaint over your handling of the original inquiry, has that been resolved yet?
No, I've sent an email and said I'm in Melbourne. If you want to interview me, I'm here, and I haven't heard anything since it was aired on your program.
Well, thank you very much for your time. Where does it go? What happens? It is confusing. It is difficult. I'll explain it all further through the morning as we go. Should there be certain police who are on still working be suspended while this is sorted out?
That's a matter for Victoria Police. It's 99.9% of the police are doing a fantastic job. This sadly the public need confidence in police. This sadly will affect that confidence, but we're only talking about a very, very small minority.
Gentlemen, thank you for coming in.
Pleasure,
Thank you.
Neil.